name is Alexis Rodriguez, intern at the LGBTQ History Museum of Central Florida, and I'm here interviewing Locke Robertson on June 6, 2020, and recorded at Agave Azul on the intersection of Kirkman and Conroy, as part of the museum's project in capturing the oral history of Florida's LGBTQ community through drag performers. With us is Jose Arajo recording this interview. Locke Robertson has been part of Orlando's LGBTQ community for the past 25 years, and his career demonstrates it. Along with being a radio personality for the Homo Happy Hour, he is also a bartender at Parliament House and has been making Orlando laugh through his drag persona April Fresh for the past 20 years. We will be focused on a series of calendars he photographed with Leigh Shannon, a local drag performer and owner of Ritzy Rags on Mills Avenue, and spotlighting some local drag talent which bring us here today. Robertson, before we discuss the calendars, could you start off by telling me a little bit about yourself, such as your childhood and your life here in Florida?
Of course. I am currently 47 years old, and I grew up in Tavares, Florida, which is up in Lake County, although I was born in Winter Park, and have been, as soon as I turned 16, came to join the Orlando scene. As soon as I got a car, that's where I went. And then I went away to college in Savannah, Georgia, where I got a degree in photography. And then when I moved back to Florida, I started taking pictures of the LGBTQ community, primarily local drag queens. And then it blossomed into drag from all over the country.
So you mentioned photography. Can you tell us a little bit of your interest in photography? How did it start?
I went to a small Christian school that did not have a whole lot of programs. However, starting in 10th grade, I got on the yearbook staff and excelled at that, and that became one of my creative passions. So 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I was in charge of pretty much all the photos for the yearbook in high school.
Awesome. You have a drag personality called April Fresh.
I do.
When did you discover drag, and when did you involve yourself with drag performance?
So actually, around 94 is when I first dipped my toes into drag, because I lived with 3 other drag queens. And I would go enter the talent shows, but I was really terrible. So I hung up my wig for a minute or two. But then when I started working at Parliament House, I chose to dust off the wig and do a performance for our Turnabout show, and I went with comedy, and everybody enjoyed it, and that's why I kind of leaned towards the comedic performances.
So, let's talk about Florida's LGBTQ community. What was the social climate like during the 1980s and 90s for you as a gay man and as a drag performer?
So, I'm far too young to really remember the 80s too much. However, actually, the very first gay bar I stepped foot in, I would drive to Orlando to get to be part of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which was at the time at the AMC associated with the Fashion Square Mall, which is, I believe, a church now, if it's even open. And so this is around 88, 89. And when I joined that group, we did a little review show at a bar called City Lights, which was very close to the intersection of I-4 and Orange Blossom Trail. It has long since been demolished, but I think at age 16, I was in that bar in fishnets and high heels doing a performance.
Oh my God.
I don't think my parents knew.
So can you tell me a little bit about how LGBTQ people socialized during this time period? How did it change?
This was before Grindr. This was before meeting anyone. This was before social media. So in order to be around your people or to meet people, you had to go out to the bars. There were, even though there was like a gay pride parade or a gay picnic or something every once in a while, it was pretty much the bar scene. There wasn't a whole lot of other activities, other than perhaps the New Image Fitness Center, which was the original bathhouse, which was also next to City Lights in that same little complex.
Are any of those historic landmarks still stand today? Like you mentioned bars.
Let's see. So, over all these years, I've certainly seen a lot come and go.
Yes.
Where we're eating right now was a gay bar for about a year or so, 10 to 12 years ago maybe, called Rain. There was... So that complex that I was telling you about by I-4 and Orange Blossom Trail had City Lights, which was a bar, and they also had an Eagle, which was kind of a leather bar. They had the New Image Fitness Center and a video rental store and a leather store. So it was pretty much, at the time, you would go to there or Parliament House or Southern Nights or Club Firestone, which was downtown, but that was pretty much just Saturdays, maybe one off night as well. And then Hanks and Faces. Hanks is still around, and that's the men's bar up on Edgewater. And then pretty much next door to it was a bar called Faces, which was a lesbian bar. That's been gone for, I'd say, about 10 years now. Hanks is still there. It's a treat if you've never been.
I haven't. I want to go. What were some opportunities available for you during this time as well? In terms of education, work, career, were there any limitations that you experienced because of your sexuality?
It was such a different time, and not necessarily me, but more people across the board would probably not be as out or as open as they are today. Because, I guess you still technically could be fired from your job, but it doesn't happen as often now as it did then. So people just kind of kept everything under wraps a little bit more.
So let's discuss some of the calendar images.
Let's do.
Yes. Can you tell us about the motivation and the story behind the creation of these calendars?
So I had done some photographs for Leigh Shannon, and I had become friends with her. And in fact, I would even go into Ritzy Rags from time to time, and they would do a makeover on a girl, and I would do the pictures, and it was a good time. So we'd already had a business relationship, and she's like, you know what, Locke, we should do a calendar. She said, you do the photos, we'll come up with the concepts together, and we will, and I'll find a way to fund it, to get it printed. And then we'll sell them, and we're going to sell 1 million of them. So we came up with the first one fairly quickly, where we just picked the girls that we thought would help sell calendars, to be honest. And we offered them a fun photo shoot of their choice that they just had to schedule with me, and then we picked the best one and put it in the calendar.
Can you tell us a little bit about Danielle Hunter in this image for the 1998 calendar and your relationship with Danielle Hunter?
So, this is Danielle Hunter. She worked at Southern Nights at the time, and she actually lived in the same apartment complex as me. So, this was just, hey Danielle, what time do you want me to come over? Come over at 7 o'clock. Okay, let's go out to the pool. And that's what she wanted to do, and that's how this photo ended up.
And
easy.
And your relationship with Danielle?
So she was one of my favorites from back then, because she was a regular cast member at Southern Nights, and her tagline was the bold and beautiful Danielle Hunter, and she really was. And so we would have a good time. Since we lived together, or lived in the same complex, I don't believe she had a car. So whenever, sometimes we would go to the grocery store together, or if she needed, me to run her somewhere here or there, we would do that every once in a while. But yeah, in fact, I haven't actually seen her in a couple years, but we still message each other on Facebook and every once in a while.
That's great. That's awesome. What about this image of Paige King from the 1998 calendar?
So Paige King is my, I have a very special relationship with her because she was actually the first girl that I ever did photos of here in Orlando. I had shot some girls in Daytona when I lived there for a little bit. But Paige and I, she was the first one to accept me as a real photographer. And so I always say that she's responsible for my career. And she always says, no, you're responsible for my career. So it's a great relationship. She used to live in Vegas, and a couple of years ago I went out and spent the day with her, and it was fun. I think she's in Portland, Oregon now. And I don't know how much drag she does anymore. I know she works at the airport in security or something. But she was the first girl that I ever took pictures of where then she had them printed as promos to pass out to people and stuff. Now that's something that they used to do back in those days. You would have your 8x10 black and white that they would put, you'd get 100 or 200 of them printed, and then they would sign them and put them at every club they worked at. Every bar across the country in the dressing room had all the pictures up on the walls of the girls that had worked there. Parliament House still has a little section, and I was in a club in Gainesville not too long ago, maybe a year ago, and I was very touched and honored because a lot of the photos were still up displayed, and I'm like, oh, I did about half of those. So it was a cool feeling.
You mentioned Paige King being the first person to recognize you as a photographer.
Yes.
How did you develop this relationship as a photographer within the LGBT community from that point until now?
So she knew me as the little gay boy that would go and tip her in the shows. And then afterwards, where I was probably, at the very beginning when I was young, was probably intimidated by some of the established girls, she never made me feel intimidated. And we'd go have a drink at the bar, and she'd like, what are you doing this week? You should come over. And we would just hang out or do something, and then I'm like, I would be the one that would always take pictures of the girls and then have them developed at Walgreens and take them copies. And so she's like, oh, let's do a real photo shoot. So that's how that first started.
How has the community viewed you as a photographer? Has it changed, or
well,
it's still a struggle?
It was interesting because even though I am and will always be a photographer, I don't necessarily seek out photo shoots like I used to because I have so many other things going on. And I used to have, I would say, 100 photo shoots a year, and last year I probably had 15. Maybe I'm being negative, maybe 20, 25. But it was interesting because of my name. I won the Wave Award this past year for Best Photographer, which I think was funny that all those years that I was a big deal in photography, I was never even nominated, and then I win it the year that I'm not really doing a whole lot anymore. But I guess it was just probably the vote was based on my past, not so much right now, and it was still an honor, of course.
Of course. Now, we are going to talk about the famous Miss P.
Oh, I love the famous Miss P.
Yes. So there's two images here, one from the 1998 calendar and the 2000 calendar. Can you please tell us a little bit about Miss P, your relationship, and how she has influenced you?
So Miss P, you will also find her in the 1999 calendar, which is located right here. She was, talk about people that could intimidate you. She scared a lot of people. She was probably the best MC I've ever heard. When I very first started at Parliament House, and I knew her before then, but I worked at the front door. So when people would come in, they'd be like, is Miss P here tonight? And I'm like, oh, she's not here this weekend. And they would turn around and leave. They weren't coming for the drag show, they were coming to see her. So Miss P was an actor by trade, and was a comedian, and was just, the show back then was not about the other girls at all. It was about her. And she was just hilarious. And you hated her, but you loved her all at the same time. And Paul was his name. I want to say he passed away in 2001. After having been there off and on, mostly on, for probably 30 years or so. And she was, so she was coming up on Sierra Foxx. Sierra Foxx was also an early friend of mine, and the two of them lived in the same complex. So that's how I kind of got to know her. And again, I was that little gay boy that was taking pictures at the drag show. But then once she and I became friends, it was great from there on. So this first photo, I'm like, hey, Miss P, we're doing a photo shoot. What do you want to do? And she's like, well, how about we go get in the lake behind Parliament House, which is where this was taken. So that was a fun day. And then for this 2000 calendar, it was supposed to be lookalikes. And she's like, well, I'm going to be Betty Davis. And I don't know how familiar you are with Betty Davis, but that's pretty Betty Davis-ish. But yeah, she was incredible. I wish, she's probably one of the most important Orlando historical drag queen figures or personas, for sure.
There's a documentary on YouTube that talks about the anniversary of P House, Parliament House.
Yes.
And they mentioned Miss P, and they mentioned how Miss P was very secretive, like very distant from people.
So the Miss P persona was a character that she had created, and she was an old drunk lady whose teeth would fall out and whose wig would fall off. That documentary will explain it all. But there were times where she was not even drinking. She had they had the Miss P bottle behind the bar, and she'd be like, give me a shot of tequila, and she'd wink, and you would know to pour her from the bottle that was just water, because they wanted the crowd wanted the drunk Miss P, and she would go through long periods of time where she wasn't drinking, and so she would fake it because she's an actor, but nobody else knew, and they were all happy, and it was incredible. Yeah, it was really cool. But yeah, she was great. She would do, she was always current on Broadway shows and stuff. So she would do like weird, obscure Broadway songs where all the other girls in the show were doing current top 40 and stuff. I first met her in 1994, and she was a joy to know.
Can you tell us a little information as well about Sierra Foxx?
Yes, I can. So Sierra just passed away during the COVID 2020 time. She was... I was very close with her like I was with Paige King, because she definitely did not have a car, and I had a car. and she wanted me to take her everywhere, which I did because she was so much fun to be around. She was hilarious, but she was also incredible on stage. There are lots of YouTube clips. You should check them out. But for her photo shoot for the '98 calendar, she's like, well, I'm hungry. Let's go to Crystle's. And so we did, and this is not an act. That is what she would order, and ate every one of them because she was a large woman. But yeah, she was always a good time. Anybody that had ever seen her perform will remember. She was incredible. In fact, she lived on the same street as Pulse, and so while she couldn't leave for a while all that was happening, but it was she one of the best entertainers ever of all time, and she would do the same number. I've seen her do her "Give Me Tonight, Let the Music Play" mix by Shannon from 1994 till about a year ago, and still every single time you're completely entertained, and that's the sign of a true performer, you know. Yeah, she was great. She also was exactly 1 year older than me, but she would, funny at the end, even though I'm 47, which would have made her 48, she would always say that she's 39. I'm like, okay, you can be 39. Yeah, but she was fantastic.
Can you tell us a little bit about Crystle Chambers and your relationship?
Why, yes, I can. So remember when I was talking about those drag queens I lived with?
Yes.
One of them was Crystle Chambers. In fact, this was taken in my apartment for '98, and it was taken at the 2001 of her as Cher was taken at Ritzy Rags, I believe. She was originally from Lakeland, but moved to Orlando, and she got into the drag scene just before me. And so, we'll put it this way, she and I would often enter the talent shows together, but she would win them. But no, she was great. She is great. She sews all her own stuff. She taught me most of what I know about makeup. And she was a self-sufficient. So she needed to have costumes made, so she learned how to sew. She needed to learn how to paint her face, so she figured it out. Rather than being taught by someone. Doesn't mean you can't pick up traits from people, but she was a great roommate and fun to live with, as well as a good performer.
Is she still performing?
Still performing. I don't think that often, but more in the Tampa area. She lives in Lakeland, and there's only so much drag in Lakeland, so I think she does some regular Tampa gigs, as well as she still performs with Leigh Shannon at Hamburger Mary's here in Orlando. I don't know if it's every Saturday, but maybe every other or something like that.
Off topic, you mentioned Hamburger Mary's.
Yes.
What's the impact of Hamburger Mary's in Orlando and the LGBTQ community?
So Hamburger Mary's is, God, I don't even know how long they've been there. 12, 13 years, something like that. It's usually best to go to Broadway brunch once a month, since April Fresh is performing there. But that's a side note. The great thing about Hamburger Mary's, now we're in a world where people want to see drag because it's so mainstream. There's still some people out there that do not want to go to a gay bar at midnight on a Saturday night to see a drag show, especially when they can have a burger and fries with their show. So I think Hamburger Mary's, especially here in Orlando, has really stepped up their game recently too, because they do like shows Friday and Saturday nights, Saturday brunch, Sunday brunch. Tuesdays, they have bingo, so they have a lot of entertainment that's, I would guess, more for a straight crowd, but still, you know, it's a little, is there a straight crowd anymore? Is there a gay crowd anymore? You know what I mean? It's, as gay bars are, in the big picture, probably not doing as well as they were several years ago, because gay people can go anywhere now. I think that put it this way, I can do drag at noon on a Sunday and have just as much fun and make more money than I could at a smoky, dingy bar in the middle of some weird city. Yeah.
So, can you please tell us a little information about Leigh Shannon? Obviously, you mentioned her before.
Yes.
And the images here and the relationship you have with her.
So, speaking of being a hit at Hamburger Mary's, Leigh Shannon, I think, is the first consistent drag performer to work there. I think once a month she'll do like a illusion show, which is lookalikes, and then every other Saturday it's just anything goes. So for this, I already talked about how she and I had a business relationship, but for the '98 calendar, this is actually my favorite photo in it, and because she probably had the biggest concept of what she wanted. And she's like, I want to do a train station, and I'm bringing props and everything. And so we had a great time. She got in drag, and her husband was with us, and we set everything up. And this ended up being the photo we ended up using. However, there was she waited until a train came, and then she was flagging it down, and it was very good. But this is just glamorous, and I love this photo, and I know she does too. And then for the 2000, we had actually already done this photo, and she's like, "It's so good, let's just use it," because the album by Bette Midler, Bathhouse Betty, or Bathhouse Bet, had come out, and we basically redid the cover. And if you've seen the cover, it's pretty accurate. The only interesting thing is, this is kind of how it was for Bette, but Leigh's feet actually only stop about right here, so she was standing up on a box and then had the rest of the skirt draped over it. But it's very good. But
Is this a film, or
this was one of her albums. And yeah, look up Bathhouse Betty by Bette Midler, and you'll see the comparison, because that's pretty much a recreation photograph.
Right. So, can you tell us a little information about Amy DeMello and the 1998 calendar?
Yes, I can. So Amy is also another girl that I had known previously. I believe she's originally from Mobile, Alabama, but she's the Danielle Hunter of Tampa Bay. So she's been one of the Tampa Bay girls since at least '94, probably longer. In fact, she was a contestant in the very first pageant I ever saw, which was also in '94 at a bar that was open for about 10 minutes called The Library, and she entered the Miss Library pageant. And I'm still friends with her. I talked to her the other day. She came over to my apartment because she's like, "Oh, it's going to be a free photo shoot. Great, we'll do some for the calendar, and then we'll also do some for me." So we just did some photos, and for the calendar, this was actually just an old vacuum I had sitting around, and she's like, "Well, let me do like a housewife vacuuming thing in a gown," and that's what we ended up with. And I'm like, I'll take it. It worked out. There were lots of good photos of her from this shoot that she ended up using for many things.
So, can you tell us a little bit about Chanaile Solitaire?
Yes.
And the images for the calendar and your relationship with this person?
So, Chanaile Solitaire also a good friend of Leigh Shannon's, and worked at her shop for quite a while. She was a trans woman, but a lot of people didn't know that because although she had breasts, she was always overalls and like a bulky sweater, and she could probably get away with either one. But she worked at City Lights. She worked at a bar for a minute called Boxcars. She never really worked at the large clubs, but was always the big girl in the small clubs, if you know what I mean. And she would always host like local strip shows. That was kind of her thing. So she had all her boys that she would bring and almost do like a Chippendales kind of thing. So it's interesting how much time has changed from 1998 till 2020, because she had it was actually a gospel number that she would do in this costume, where now I feel like, even though she was a woman of color, I still feel like people would be offended by this today. It's weird how things change. How things change. And this was out over by the Shakespeare Center off of Princeton. We just found a nice park. And then her doing Patti LaBelle was her big thing. So for the 2000 look-alike calendar, and I'm very proud of this picture, she did Patti LaBelle, and I don't know how familiar you are with Patti LaBelle, but it's pretty accurate. She was fantastic. Great performer. She passed away, I don't remember the year, but it's maybe about 10, 12 years ago. And I have a gown that it used to be her competition gown, and I have it, and it's something that, even though I don't wear it very often because it's very dated, I will never part with it, because it fits me beautifully, but also the fact that it was hers, I will never get rid of it.
Hold a special moment to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit about Carmella,
Marcella Garcia, oh my.
and the images for the 1998 calendar and the 2000 calendar?
Yep.
Your relationship with her?
So, Carmella Marcella Garcia. Not Latina at all. She was from Kentucky. She was, I would say, next to Miss P, the greatest MC I've ever seen. She was she was hilarious. She would sing live. She would do comedy. She would do country. She would do gospel. She was well-rounded. She was a pageant queen. She was Miss Continental Plus. She was the very first Miss USA at large. And when we started the Miss Comedy Queen pageant, we made her the emeritus, which, if you don't know what an emeritus is, the pageant we were trying to create, we knew that she would fit the mold for the type of thing we were doing. So we basically honored her by being the first. So on the first year we had the pageant, she got to be the one to crown the actual first winner. So she also is a person I hold very near and dear to me. She gave me my first booking as April Fresh here in Orlando at Southern Nights. And the majority of photos you will ever see of her that I took. This one we actually took out in the courtyard of what was then and is now Southern Nights. And then for the 2020, we decided, okay, well, what character do you want to do? I'm like, well, I want to do Miss Piggy. She's like, don't dare anybody say that she's not a celebrity. And so she said this is how she wanted to do it, and she said, Locke, go pick up a ham. And I said, okay, I don't really understand why there's a ham on the frog, and I will not pretend to. But she did take the ham home with her and cook it. So maybe she just wanted a ham. And I can't blame her. Ham is delicious.
Yeah.
So this was her choice for character to do for 2020. But yeah, I definitely miss her. She passed away a year ago, maybe somewhere between a year and 2 years ago. Yeah.
You mentioned Southern Nights, then and now. What do you
Yes.
mean by that?
So when I lived with Crystle Chambers and the other girls, we lived in Park Plaza Apartments, which is also on Bumby and literally stumbling distance. Now at the time, Southern Nights had these, you sign up for their mailing list and you would get this little newsletter. And it would give you the calendar of the next month, and it would tell you all the entertainers that are booked for that day. So you could pick the ones you wanted to go and go that night. And it would also have like 2 free drink tickets, 2 free entries for this day, 2 free, you know. And I think Wednesdays it might have been always free or a couple bucks to get in or something. And Wednesdays was the talent show. So we would just kind of base our non-home life around, what nights are we going to Southern Nights? And it was usually 4 or 5 of the 7 nights. And if we got drunk, we could just stumble home. So that was probably in our, early 20s, around 94. That was the place that we called home. And the actual building of the Southern Nights is still in. Has been several, it's been closed, it's been reopened. It's always had a slight different vibe to it. I feel like the current one that is back to being called Southern Nights is the closest to the original. But still, it used to be, in 94, nobody went to Parliament House on Sundays. They all went to Southern Nights. Now you go to Southern on Fridays. I mean, there's the nights at the different clubs over the years definitely changed over time. And this one is popular on a Monday for a while, and then it's not. And that's the circle of life, I guess.
Why do you think that occurs within?
I think people just need change. And I don't think it necessarily has to do with anything being bad. It's just, I think everything has a shelf life. Everything has a run. So, and there's always, no matter what city you're in, there's always bar wars. It's nicer when they can work together. But that's not always the case. But it's, for example, Gidget Galore had a very successful run at Parliament House on Wednesday nights with Camp Drag, and it was probably 8 or 10 years. But it just had kind of seen it had run its course. Right now I have my night there. I'm enjoying every second of it because that's how drag is. It's a roller coaster. And it's weird for me personally as a queen because it's, I'm 21 years into my career, and now is when I'm popular. Or I'm at my most popular, I should say. Or it has to do with the pageant that I run, or could be any number of things. But it's very few entertainers that can make a living off of drag, as well as have a long career. Carmella and Miss P are 2 of those people that did not need to do anything else.
They were set.
Because they made enough money off of just doing drag.
So do you feel like the drag performance is a profitable industry now, at the moment?
I think drag is more popular than ever due to things like RuPaul's Drag Race. And, back in my day, the only thing I had reference to was like the film Tootsie and maybe Priscilla Queen of the Desert and Tu Wong Fu, where now every sitcom has a drag character in it. And, RuPaul has done wonders for the mainstreamness of it and the visibility. So I think there are more drag jobs now than ever. That being said, there's also way more girls than ever. So I would say for 95% of the people that would call themselves a drag performer, it is probably not their main source of income, just because there's not enough to go around.
Yes. You mentioned your pageant. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, yes, I can. So in 2005, me and another girl at the time named Roseanne DeChanero, we had both previously won a pageant over in the Port Richey, Florida area called the Miss Comic Strip. She was the first, I was the second. And then she's like, and then it lasted a couple more years, but then the guy that ran it passed away. So we talked to his partner, and he's like, yeah, y'all should take it and do whatever you want with it. So we were going to start the Miss Comic Strip pageant here in Orlando. But then the bar had sold, and the new bar owners were like, oh, no, you don't. This is our pageant. And we didn't want to fight or anything, so then we just started our own thing. So we started the Miss Comedy Queen pageant, thinking it would be a good, fun time. And it was. And we had 7 contestants. And then the following year we had 10 contestants, and it started to blow up. So around the 5th year, the girl, Tweeka Weed, was the reigning at the time, and she said, you know what? People love this pageant. We should do little feeder pageants where the winners of those come to this pageant. And we're like, well, let's do that. And so we started doing prelims. And now that it's in its 15th, going on 16th year, it has become a national pageant where you can't just come and enter. You have to qualify through a prelim. And we've got prelims in New York City, Ohio, Pennsylvania. We just got one in Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma. So they're all over the country, which is pretty cool. And so every year, what used to be a one-day pageant is now a 3-day pageant, although this coming year it's going to be a 4-day pageant. So people, it'll be upwards of 20 plus contestants, and we split them into groups, and it's kind of like the Miss America pageant, where you have Miss Florida, Miss Georgia, and Miss Alabama. It's kind of like that. So they all compete, and then we have a top 10, and they recompete, and it's a good time. You should come.
I will.
Yeah, it's a good time, and it's all, it's a specialty pageant, so it's all based on comedic performances and creativity. So, it's still nice if you're pretty, but we're not looking for you to be pretty. We're looking for you to be entertaining and funny and creative.
Well, you mentioned now comedy and
yes, and that
laughing.
brings us to Billie Boots.
Billie Boots from the 1998 calendar.
So, Billie Boots was a legend in Daytona Beach. She, at the time, was about 150 years old, and she was, I don't really know how old she was, but she was an old lady and was hilarious. She was very campy, and she, every time she would see me, she's like, oh, she'd hug me. Oh, it's so good to see you. How have you been? Who are you again? And I lived in Daytona for a while before I moved to Orlando. So I knew the Daytona scene, and it was like they call it the Hollywood Barn Door Complex. So I think the Hollywood was one side, and then they had the barn door was the other. So she was actually a bartender there during the day, and I remember she was famous for her Bloody Marys, and so every year we would go over there for a few days, and go have her Bloody Marys. And every year they got spicier and spicier, because I think she was going a little crazy with the hot sauce, but they were delicious. And she lived upstairs because it was a big building, and she would just come down to do her shift, go back up, and then come down to do her show, go back up. And she wasn't trying to be pretty, she was trying to be funny, and she was great, and everybody in Florida knew her. Now this crown she's wearing, so for many years, one of the longest and oldest pageants ever, drag pageants, I think it started in around 70, 71, 72 maybe, was the Miss Florida pageant, which was held in Miami. She was the first person, to my knowledge, that they ever made an honorary Miss Florida. And so and they called her like the honorary mother of Miss Florida or something. And so they presented her with that crown, and she did not want to be seen without it since they gave it to her. And they've given it to other people since, but I believe she was the first, if my recollection is correct. So this was just taken there in the kitchen at the barn door, because it was a little restaurant as well.
Is the barn door in the whole Hollywood still there? No?
Gone, demolished, or at least it's turned into something else. Daytona's drag scene has, they've gone from 3 bars to no bars to 1 bar to and it's you think Orlando's gone up and down. Daytona, any beach town really, I guess, but Daytona has not. I don't think they have anything at the moment, which is crazy. But it's such a beach towns are often so transient that there's always a handful of people that are from Daytona and stay in Daytona, but a lot of people are in and out. But I mean, that's where I got my start into bartending, so I will be grateful to Daytona. But yeah, it's that has been long gone.
Can you tell us why Billie Boots decided to be in this position?
She had no idea what she wanted to do. So we took pictures of her in the kitchen, in the bar, a few outside. She's like, well, let's just take some photos. There was no vision other than she wanted that crown on. And she's like, hey, I could get a mop and then pretend to be mopping. Well, let's do it. And this just ended up being the best one that we ended up using.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about Tiffany McCray from the 1998 calendar and your relationship with this person?
Yes. So Tiffany McCray started in Parliament House around 1995. She was one of the regular showgirls there, and this photo shoot actually also got her another couple of promos, because we just took some photos, and this was the very last one we took that day. And she's like, because she was doing all these serious ones and they were fine, but she's like, girl, let's just do a stupid fun one. I'm gonna go pretend to be on the toilet. And so we did that, and then when Leigh and I were looking at the photo, she's like, let's use this one. I'm like, you don't think it's too much? She's like, maybe a little, but let's do it. And we did it, and it is. Could you get away with that today? I don't know. I wish the bathroom looked this nice. This is the bathroom in the dressing room at the Parliament House, and it doesn't look that nice anymore. But yeah, Tiffany and I have been friends since 95. God, that's a lot of years. That's 25 years. Crazy. Yeah, but no, she's wonderful.
Can you tell us a little bit about Melissa Mason and from the 1998 calendar and your relationship with this person?
Yes, so this was also the first calendar in 98. this would probably be my second favorite photo from it. She and I have always been friends, but we didn't really hang out a lot, just because she lived in Lakeland or Winter Haven. But I liked her, and she liked me, but she's like, why don't you just come over and we'll do what happens? I have this pond. I'm like, okay. I didn't know what that meant. She's like, I also want to do like a bubble bath thing with champagne. So we went over and we did her photos. She actually lived in, I think it is technically Winter Haven. And so she got in her bathtub and had all the bubbles and had the champagne. We did that photo, and although they're good, we weren't as happy with the angle or anything. And these are back in the days, you don't get to see how your photos look. You have to send your black and white film to the lab and get them back a couple days and have a contact sheet and look at those and then pick one and then blow it up. It was a process. There was nothing instant like we have today. But she had one of these koi fish ponds on her property. And she's like, let me go get in the pond real quick. And this was, again, only a few at the end of the roll of film, because you didn't dare shoot more than 36 exposures. It'd be too expensive. So she's like, hold on, I'm going to catch a fish. And I remember standing on the side just watching her, and then she got one. And then she just did that, and I snapped it, and that's the one that took. And I'm very, very happy with this photo.
Can you tell us about Natasha Richards, from the 2000 calendar and your relationship with this person?
So, remember when I said Miss P scared a lot of people? Natasha scared me. Natasha would fill the room with her personality and command your attention and had to be the center of attention. That being said, and she was probably one of the most talented, entertaining people. I remember distinctly her doing the song Let's Give 'Em Something to Talk About by Bonnie Raitt. I hated that song. I saw her perform it, and now I love the song because her performance was so good. Again, the true sign of a great entertainer. She was a former Miss US of A, and I think she was probably the youngest winner, because I think she won that at around age 24, 25. And she was first runner-up to Miss Continental. She won Miss National. She was a pageant girl, and I believe by training, she was a dance instructor at like Arthur Murray or something. So great dancer, super charismatic, fun to watch. And I had never actually even seen her do Liza Minnelli. But Leigh wanted her in the calendar, and Leigh's like, well, you can look just like Liza. And I don't even think she had ever done Liza. But she's just like, okay, let's do it. And so she did it. And it worked out. But she's one. She's also passed away. I do not recall the year. It's been a minute. It's been 6 years, something like that. One of when I'm old and on my deathbed, and I'm thinking about great drag performers and entertainers of the past, she will be up there for sure, because she was fantastic. This photo does not give a good example of what she looked like either, because she was big hair, big boobs, and little costumes, and she was one of the first ones that I ever saw that would come out in a gown, and then all of a sudden the ballad turned into an upbeat song, and then she would turn around and rip off her skirt and then rip off her top and be in a little two-piece. So she was like one of the originators of the reveal, as far as I'm concerned. I'm sure she did not invent it, but she was one of the first ones I saw do it.
You mentioned the look. What is the difference between how drag queens did makeup before to them now?
Well, back in these days, in the early 90s, there was no RuPaul's Drag Race, so you couldn't look at other girls' makeup. There was no YouTube for you to have tutorials or someone teaching you how to do a smoky eyelid or whatever. So you kind of just had to figure it out. Or if you have a drag mother, maybe she'll teach you some tricks. Or, you're sitting in the dressing room getting ready. How did you do your eyes like that? So you kind of pick up things. But back in these days, you kind of had to learn it on your own. Where it's interesting, now they'll say something that's called, like, this person is a look queen. Well, that didn't exist back then because it was about the performance more than the look. If you had the look, that was just a bonus. But now, and I'm not dogging the look queens, I think they're great, but on RuPaul's Drag Race, a lot of the girls that are about the looks have very rarely performed. So it's a big difference when you're just focusing on the makeup and the costuming and taking a photo for your Instagram, rather than these girls, which are working in little bars and figuring out the performance side of things first, and then working on look later.
You mentioned drag mothers. Was that a big thing? Or a very important thing back then?
Yes. It still is to a degree. There's back then, either the first person that painted your face was your drag mother, or somebody who was your drag mentor would adopt you as their daughter. So there's a lot of people, with the same last name. I mean, there's a lot of Taylors out there. There's a lot of Sanchez's, a lot of Bonets, a lot of, there's so many drag houses even, but where it's a drag mother that has had kids and they've had kids, and it's not uncommon to be like, oh yeah, that's my granddaughter, and that's kind of a neat thing. I personally never went that route and just kind of, I don't want any baby freshes, and I wanted something that was unique. But that doesn't mean I haven't had lots of drag sisters that have certainly helped me out. But there is, I think now you see a lot of it. Just referring to RuPaul's Drag Race, like Coco Montrese, who was Mocha Montrese's daughter, and then the Kahana Montrese from a season or two ago. So there's a lot of dignity to having the name too. Mm-hmm. Mocha Montrese, who's Coco's mother, was a cast member at Parliament House for many years, and she lived right around the corner from me.
Can you tell us a little bit about, going back to the photographs, can you tell us a little bit about Chi Lalique?
Chi Lalique, named after Lalique, which is a crystal. A bougie vase is a Lalique. She did this Vitamita Vegemin number by Lucille Ball. That was kind of one of her things she was known for. And she looked like her. And for this calendar, this was actually the first photograph we shot. Or the first character we shot. On the stage at the Parliament House. She was from the Port Richey area, which is north of Tampa, and she was probably had done drag a little bit longer than me, but she was kind of just ahead of me, and she was always around. And I'm still friends with her. I don't get to see her very often, and I think she only does drag maybe once a week or so, if even that much now. Hairdresser by day, but I've stayed at her house many times. In fact, a lot of the Tampa girls that I got to shoot, I would go and stay with Chi for a weekend or something, and she would set up appointments where this girl would come over at 2 o'clock, and then I'd have a 4, and then a 6 and an 8. And it was great. It was a great way to get a lot of photos done without making a whole lot of trips.
Yeah.
And she was also friends with all of them too, so she's just like, girl, you're coming over to get your photos done. Okay, I'll take it. Yeah, she was wonderful.
And now, can we talk about Holly Graham for the 2000 calendar and a little bit about the person and your relationship with this person?
So, Holly Graham, not only is this my favorite photograph in this calendar, the 2000 calendar, she was actually my referral. She was I knew her from being very new in the drag scene. And I had seen her in a newcomer pageant, which she won, and I kind of got to know her, and I'm like, for being someone so new, you're a great performer and you're fantastic with makeup and creative. So when Leigh and I were talking about who's going to be in the 2000 calendar, I said, she's like, I would love to have like a Marilyn or something. I'm like, I think I have someone for you. And Leigh didn't even know her at the time. And I'm like, you're just going to have to trust me on this one. And turns out this photo, Leigh must have liked it because she ended up being the main cover photo as well of that calendar. So this is probably my second shoot with her. And this is probably only about a year into her career. And because I shot her Central Florida newcomer photos, which were her first photos. Since then, not only is she still a very talented makeup artist, amongst millions of other jobs, but she also is known as Erika Wagner is her name, and she is known as the drag photographer, who I go have my photographs taken by now. So it's come full circle because I used to do her pictures and now she's doing mine, and it's really cool. She and I have been great friends this whole time, and there is not a more talented photographer out there, in my opinion, because she will create things and do Photoshop, but only in a way where it still very much resembles the person. I have seen people that get a little too yanked and tweezed and pulled, and it doesn't look like them at all.
Yeah.
She's the perfect balance to me. But yeah, she's great.
So, you mentioned the tweezing and those stuff, the thing that plastic surgery, is it prevalent within the drag community? Or?
Very. So a lot of drag is often a stepping stone for a boy that's transitioning into a girl. Whether that be on the stage, that's only for certain, some people, but over the years in the community, whether they end up transitioning or just stay boys, I have seen a lot of, cheeks and a lot of lips and a lot of, here a pinch, there a pull. So yes, it's very common. Over the past, now back in those days, it was usually the silicone ladies in town, and she's in room 107, so let's go get pumped. That's what they would call it. They touched on this in the show Pose. And it was pretty much, back in those days, it was just injecting silicone right into your body rather than an implant. In the past few years, there have been a lot of people that have had problems with their older silicone. So there's a lot of people trying. I don't think it's as popular now. I think people are more likely to save the money and spend it on going to a legit plastic surgeon. But that's the difference though. You could probably get your breasts done for a few hundred as opposed to a few thousand. So I understand both ways, but I feel like it's a good practice that is, for health purposes, not as popular anymore.
So, can you tell us a little bit about China and the 2000 calendar and your relationship?
So China is from Jacksonville, Florida, and used to be a footlight player at the Parliament House. I remember her early on in '94 she's about the same age as me, maybe a year younger, but she started in pageants early. Is a dancer and a Madonna impersonator, hence why we shot her as Madonna. And I thought it was interesting, she's a trans woman, and her biological brother is also a trans woman and performer by the name of Beverly Wild. And they look very different now, but at the time, somewhere back in the archives, I have a photo of the two of them, both with big bleached blonde hair, and it's kind of difficult to tell which one is which. I think they're a year apart. They're not twins, but very charismatic, a lot of energy on stage. I still talk to her on Facebook, but haven't actually seen her in a while. I don't think she does a lot of drag anymore, but now she styles wigs and sells them to people. But she was put in the calendar to hit the Jacksonville market, because she was a big deal there, but also her Madonna was so good and she was so well known for that. Yeah, and she lived here in Orlando for, I would say, a good 2 to 4 years, working at Parliament House, and was great in the show.
I see that Parliament House is being mentioned.
Yeah. So Parliament House, the Footlight Theater and the Parliament House stage we kind of take it for granted here, because that is something in the drag community across the country. That's one of the few bars that still have like a show cast and a real stage and productions and people come to a show. Years ago there was a lot more of that, but now it's kind of like a bar that has 2 or 3 girls. So the fact that they have that venue, and I guess Orlando is somewhere that a lot of people want to come, that people are always, they would work there if given the chance, so for someone to actually become a cast member is very prestigious. For people, in fact, a lot of people have moved to Orlando to work there. And then, like, for example, other than Darcel, 2 that we've had there for years is Melanie Von Cruz, who moved here from Pittsburgh or Philadelphia last. I think she's from somewhere else. And Giselle, Barbie Royale, moved here from Jacksonville to work there. So it's known nationwide as being a prestigious place to work.
What do you feel like, as a community, Parliament House isn't viewed as a scene? It seems like that's the common feel. Like Parliament House is kind of...
Parliament House, because it has been a gay landmark for 45 years, everybody has been there, but everybody knows about it. I was in London, England a couple years ago, and I was just talking to someone at the bar, and I said that I was from Orlando. They're like, "Oh, Parliament House," and they had been there. So it's known across the world. And the fact that it's, you know, multiple bars and a theater and a hotel and a restaurant and a pool, that it has so much to offer. As seedy as it may be in certain ways, and as much as people will say that they don't like it, they always go back. I see people on Facebook complaining about it, and then funny, the next day there they are at my bar. Okay, we're good. I just and ring her up. I'll call her back. And we're good. Yeah, so Parliament House, like I said, it doesn't really feel like work to me to go there every day, but also I feel blessed to be a part of the family.
Awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about Denise Russell and the 2000 calendar and your relationship with this person?
Yes, so speaking of imports, Denise Russell also worked at Parliament House for a few years, and she was an import from Youngstown, Ohio. She's a former Miss USA at Large and a former Continental Plus, and she also kind of gives the illusion of Mae West, which is why for the 2000 calendar, that's what she wanted to do. This photograph was taken at Ritzy Rags, and she, or was it taken at Parliament House on the stage? It might have been. Good, as was most of these from 2000. She was a singer, so every once in a while she would do a lip sync performance, but it was usually her singing a country, mostly country, a little of everything, and had used her own voice, which she sounded like a woman, and was also a pretty good MC. So when she was hired, when Darcel wasn't there, Denise would be the MC. Yeah, I believe she's back in Ohio now, but she goes on tour a lot and stuff.
Right. So can you please tell us a bit about Miss Sammy from the 2000 calendar and your relationship with this person? And
yes,
why?
so Miss Sammy, also known as Sam Singhouse, was from Orlando, but was an actor and moved to Broadway and got cast in the original. She's on the album of the original soundtrack to La Cage aux Folles, which is what the movie The Birdcage is loosely based on. And she is host bingo every Tuesday at Hamburger Mary's and has for years. She's also, she started with us at the Miss Comedy Queen pageant as one of the MCs. She's fantastic. I was in her pool the other day. She has a cool hot tub combo, so you get one and then get the other. But no, she's great and is hilarious, and she wanted to do a spoof of something. So for the 2020 or for the 2000 calendar, she did a twisted version of Barbra Streisand. And instead of Yentl, it's Mental. Yeah, she's a good time gal, and she also knows a lot of, she used to own a bar called Big Bang, which was on Orange Avenue, which was not really gay, but not really straight. It was kind of one of those in the early 90s, which for that time period, you didn't usually get a lot of crossover. She would be a great one for you to interview as well. I can look you up.
Please, thank you. And now the final image of the great Darcel Stevens for the 2000 calendar. Can you please tell us your relationship with Darcel and why?
Wrapping it up with Darcel Stevens. Here for this calendar in 2000, she did Whoopi Goldberg, which from Sister Act, probably because she already had the costume and didn't, I mean, it does look like her. She is I've known her also since 1994. I have been on road trips with her. I've been a co-worker with her for 24 years. So someone I know very well. She has been the MC at Parliament House for, basically she was the next in line. When Miss P was out, she would fill in. And then when Miss P passed, she basically took over. And she's the entertainment director for Parliament House and is the current reigning Continental Plus and has been an MC there for many, many years. What else you got?
That's a good clue.
Before our battery dies.
Looking back at these photos, in what ways do you feel that drag performance has evolved?
Well, I think for one, my photography has definitely gotten better. But I also think that this is more what nowadays people would call old school drag. Where now I think there's a lot more, it's not just a man trying to look like a woman. I think it's a lot more people creating characters and, you know, whichever direction they go, they just go with it. You know, you never heard of a bio queen back then, or even a club kid, or even a, you know, there's just so many, there were no drag kings back then. I mean, there were, but not like, now it's very, back then it was a man dressed as a woman. If they had breasts, they were still a drag queen. Where now, that might be offensive. Some people don't even like the term drag, but yet they're on stage doing drag. You know, it's weird. It's just not weird. It's just very different. Where now, sometimes it's just about who can make the most unique and creative makeup. As you can tell from the variety of contestants on RuPaul's Drag Race, you know.
As being in Pride Month, what would you say to young LGBTQ people or those who will come along with each
Like my advice to them would be
performers or
whether you're a performer or not, if you're just coming out in the LGBT community, learn from your past, or learn from the past of the community, figure out who you are, and stay true to who you are. But never take the people that came before you for granted. I did not, and I hope that no one ever does, because in order to be great, you have to know where your roots and your origins are from.
your time here with us today. The LGBTQ History Museum in Central Florida, and I greatly appreciate the amount of information you provided us for this reservoir of LGBT history.
It is my pleasure. Thank you.